actual goal is to win the right project with the right customer for the right price. It's not to win every project at any price.
Hey Growth Detect, welcome back. I am your host, Tyler Sumala, and we are continuing to dive into the top 10 questions that I get from architecture firm owners most often. And by the way, if you have found any value in this podcast, please just take a moment to subscribe and leave a review. They mean so much to me because it helps other architects get the help that they need. So today I've invited my friend Rens Hayes to chat about the risk of solely relying on word of mouth to grow your business. He shares the long-term mindset and strategies that he's used to make word of mouth one small piece of a much larger puzzle. And the result is a thriving firm doing amazing work for premium clients. And before we jump in, a huge thanks to our friends at the American Institute of Steel Construction for sponsoring Season 4 of the Growth Tech Podcast. Here is a fun fact for you. Did you know all domestically produced steel beams and columns are 100% recyclable and contain, on average, 92% recycled content? You can learn more about sustainable steel at aisc.org/sustainable. That is aisc.org/sustainable. Check it out, and let's go ahead and jump in. Rens, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. I'm really excited to dive into it today. So often when I'm speaking with an architect or with an engineering firm owner, the same topic keeps on coming up, right? Because I'll ask them, we talked about this on your podcast last week too, right? I'll ask them, how are you generally getting most of your work today? And 9 out of 10 times, right, what they end up saying to me is, of course, word of mouth, right? And they're wondering, should I be solely relying on word of mouth to continue getting business? But I'm curious what your initial reaction to that is.
Tyler, thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm excited to dig in today. And you're right. Like architecture, engineering, it's a relationship business, right? When I hear relationship business, that also means it's really hard for a customer to tell the difference between you and somebody else if they haven't worked with you before, right? Which means you can get commoditized. The question I like to ask when someone says like, I'm a word of mouth business or I rely on referrals, it's like, what are you doing to drive word of mouth conversation? What are they saying about your firm? Do you have any kind of consistency from your brand and your delivery or your differentiation that would actually lead word of mouth to be a positive impression that would increase the likelihood that you got a referral? Word of mouth doesn't just mean like, I hope they say Rens is cool. I hope they say Tyler's great at what he does. Like, I'm sure Tyler is great, but is he greater than the other firm that I heard over here? Is Rens better than this guy? What does Rens do different? I don't know. He just said, I worked with Rens, he was good. Like, I don't think that drives lead conversion.
You're right. Yeah, it's one part of it, right? There's the conversion side and then there's the attraction side. That's why I was so excited to bring you on. When I saw this question pop up, in terms of one of the most common ones, I was like, Rens would be a perfect person to bring on because you've been absolutely crushing it, right? So you were on, I remember seeing you on LinkedIn, like when I actually started being active like 4 years ago. But for those of you that don't know, this is Rens Hayes of H+O Structural Engineering, right? You're based out of Boston. You have an office in Denver as well. But what I've been so impressed with just in kind of following you over the last 3 to 4 years is how much value you deliver on LinkedIn and like outside of your business to help really grow that brand, right? And to position, like when we talk about positioning yourself, I don't want to say thought leader because I think that's dumb. But what you're positioning yourself as is a premium service, is as a premium offer, as someone that can solve the problems that your audience faces. So when you think about that, I think you're the perfect example of it. You have an amazing podcast with industry experts. You deliver so much value on your LinkedIn, and specifically to not your colleagues, but to your clients, right? Your ideal clients. Like that's exactly who you're speaking to. And that's such a big shift. So I was really excited to bring you on. But for those of you, for those of people that don't know you, introduce us a little bit to H+O Structural Engineering yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Tyler. Rens Hayes, co-founder, principal of H+O Structural Engineering. My co-founder and partner is Jeremiah O'Neill. He's one of the best engineers I've ever met in my life. He's that 0.01% engineer, and then he's the guy you want to hang out, have a drink with, play golf with. Can explain the most complicated things very simply to somebody that's a non-technical person. And early in my career, I was kind of like, my normal ego is compete. I can beat you at anything, right? Like, Tyler, you're an architect. Like, that's just because I'm not an architect. But if I wanted to, I'll go become an architect and I'll
Right.
compete. That was like my natural inner, and it served me well, I think, through like high school and college playing like soccer and sports and stuff, because I didn't realize that I had to put in work to be better than somebody. I just thought I should be.
Yeah.
Fast forward to today. And I was thankful I learned that early in my professional career, because I recognized how great he was at engineering and how much work it would take for me to be able to match his technical acumen and gain all that experience. And that led me down this path of trying to better understand business. The insight that I gained: 80% of businesses are the same, 20% are unique. It might even be more. So architecture, engineering, medical, like, but we all have to have strategic planning. We all need leadership. We all need sales, marketing, people, operations, finance, and legal. So a lot of businesses the same. The unique part is the industry specific delivery. And I quickly pivoted early in my career, really like about 4 years into my career. I essentially got my engineering license and I started trying to become an expert at the other areas of business so that I could better position and better leverage the structural engineering expertise and connect it to customer and marketplace value. And I guess that was a long way coming back. What we do at H+O Structural Engineering, we design, we're experts in structural engineering and optimization. So we serve architects and commercial real estate developers nationally, generally doing large scale, mixed use, multifamily, life science, industrial type buildings.
And by the way, for the architects that are listening to this, you all should go check out their website, which we'll link in the show notes or something like that. But they have amazing offers for architects, depending on the work that you're doing, but that are really just going to help to, speed up your process, save you and your team time, save you and your clients money. So it's just a great, we were talking about this a little bit I joined Ren's podcast too, but we were talking about this last time, but just amazing, no-brainer offers. He's got a great business in place, and so go check out his team. But when we think about sole reliance on word of mouth, and I can tell you, having had hundreds of conversations with architecture and engineering firm owners, the vast majority of them not only are getting most of their work through word of mouth, but are pretty much like they're truly solely relying on word of mouth to win their business. I'm curious why you think this is so persistent in the industry.
Everybody went to school and their passion was their trade, was being an architect, was being an engineer, was being a mechanic, was being a doctor. They didn't go to school to study business and how to grow revenue and create a consistent revenue engine. So it's almost, I look at it as more of a blind spot than it is like making an informed decision. They're unaware of what it takes to drive consistent revenue. And then they hear a lot of their peers, like I often say in our industry, because it's such a mature industry and easily commoditized, we end up doing competitor-based pricing, which is pricing on low fee that often shows up in less, like for the workforce, less career growth opportunities and earning potential, because they have to work harder to deliver more results without as much opportunity out of it. But really, that challenge of seeing what your competitors do and hearing that echo chamber makes you think that you're doing the right thing. So when you ask your peer, yep, it's a referral business. You hear somebody on a podcast, yep, all of our work comes from referrals. You see their pricing and you try to compete on low price because you just lost 3 jobs in a row to a lower fee. Like, all of those things are influencing your decision making because you think you're doing something wrong. But it's really taking influence from somebody that's probably has other flaws that you don't know about.
That's such a great point. Yeah. Where are you getting your knowledge and mentorship and support from? And are they running their business in a way that you want to run your business?
I actually look at, when I see my competitors, we track so much data on what it takes to deliver a project, what it's worth to our customer, and all of those things. When I see my competitors hiring somebody that we didn't hire, or taking a project at a fee we would never take at, like, I look at that as like, okay, now they're busy managing symptoms of hiring like unqualified talent and delivering projects at too low a fee. They can't possibly be investing in the other areas of their business like we do to better serve our customers, to create measurable value. So it almost like, you do that one time, not a big deal. You do that for a decade, you achieve like escape velocity in terms of like team dynamic, value delivered, consistency, and opportunity.
That's such a great point, because what happens when you actually compete on price is that, yeah, you win work and you keep people in your office busy for whatever period of time, but you actually make zero progress in your business typically, right? Because you might just be breaking even on that project, at which point all that happened is that you just kept everyone busy for whatever, six or 12 months, but weren't actually able to make any measurable impact on anything outside of just keeping people busy.
This to me, this all comes back to business education and investing in like, where are you learning from? So the career architect, the career engineer, it's like, are you solving for the right goal? One, in your career, but two, for your business. So as a small business owner, at first you're starting from a place of fear. You're like, am I going to make it? Can I make enough money to provide food and shelter for my family? Like, or am I going to end up on the street or on the street or my mom's couch? And then you're starting from a place of scarcity and then constantly kind of playing from behind, because you never built it with the intent of creating a company that could scale. And so when you're competing on low price, right, you might be taking on work that's low price because you're afraid to win the job. But the actual goal is to win the right project with the right customer for the right price. It's not to win every project at any price. And I think that comes from a scarcity and a fear mindset. And I think starting to educate yourself that you're not solving for just your W-2 income that year. Like, did you make the most profit? But like, did I build a high quality organization that's going to increase in value next year and the year after that and the year after that? Right. I think a lot of small business owners would be well served to start to understand how enterprise and organizational value is created. You wouldn't invest in a public company. You wouldn't buy stock in a public company that didn't have transparent financials and a way to grow stock value for the next decade. Yet you have 100% of this private business ownership, and you're doing nothing to improve the stock value year over year. You're just worried about your W-2 income. And like, that to me is a blind spot. And until you kind of flip that switch and become aware of the decisions that you have to make that happen, like, you're forever going to be kind of fighting the symptoms of the root cause.
I love this conversation because we're talking about, I mean, so we started with, solely relying on word of mouth. And what we're realizing is this is one small piece of a much larger kind of series of symptoms that traces its way back to like what you were talking about, that scarcity mindset and really ultimately limiting beliefs, right? And short-term planning. Because what you're really talking about is long-term planning. And I think that can be hard, right, for an owner, for any business owner, right? I mean, it's hard for me too, right? It's hard for any business owner to think so far ahead, right, in terms of really understand what it is that they want. But the effort of just sitting down and taking a moment to consider, what is it that I actually want to build? Because the chance of you wanting to build something where you're just breaking even year over year over year versus something that's actually producing compounding effects for you and your employees and your life and your business is like, I'm sure that you want the latter instead of the former, but you never actually think about how to get the latter, right? Or you think about it a lot, but you don't actually take any action towards it. But I think you're a perfect example, because I already know from chatting with you last time that you took that long-term plan, right? And you built something up. Like, we're now about a decade into it, right? Or a full decade into it, I forget.
Yeah, we're just past 9 years this summer.
Yeah. So you're coming up on the decade, but you were telling me about how like you're finally now where you wanted to be, at the beginning. But it's such an elongated process to get there. It takes time. There's no like quick silver bullet, like turn on a switch, you're there. Yeah. It takes time to build up that brand equity, that trust, to continue testing different offers and finding out and identifying the gaps and identifying the common issues, and also gaining the experience to be able to execute those at the premium level that we're talking about, right?
100%.
But you're there now, and look at you. Thriving young business owner. You got like another 20 to 30 years of just absolutely crushing it.
Let's hope so. That's the idea.
Yeah, because you put in that upfront work, right? Yeah. To get it in that.
It does take laying a foundation. If I were to share to other small business owners, like, yeah, Jeremiah and I left and launched H+O. We weren't former executives or principals. We didn't own the big relationships. We could have designed a $300 million tower together on day one, but we didn't have the relationships or the brand equity that somebody would give us that tower, right? And so we really had to build a business and kind of build from small and mid-sized projects backed up to large scale. And that took time because we had to build the relationships. Project sales cycles are long, let alone delivery cycles. A year of design plus 2 years of construction. Then it goes, and you have to build that brand and eliminate the perceived risk from the marketplace of working with a new firm. And I would say having vision that we were going to build a national organization and do large scale projects made it easier. We had to constantly pay attention to our price point in the market, our ability to attract and develop talent, and we throttled revenue growth based on how fast we could get talent. So if all of a sudden we could drive revenue, but I didn't have enough good people that met our hiring standards coming in the door, we raised our prices. We said no to the bottom 20%. And then we became profitable and delivering high level service and quality. We didn't overwhelm our team with low margin work or people that weren't the ideal clients. So to go from year 1 to year 9, we essentially had to recycle our entire revenue piece because the projects we did in the first few years are not the same type of projects that are going to make us a national company. And so we essentially had to say no politely or just price ourselves out of those markets.
All right, growth techs, check this out. In Boulder and Atlanta, old buildings came down, but their steel beams did not go to waste. They went straight into new projects. And that is the power of US-made structural steel. So here is how it works. Instead of relying on virgin iron and blast furnaces, we actually use modern technology to melt recycled scrap in electric arc furnaces, and that produces 6 million tons of the most sustainable steel in the world every single year. And the carbon footprint keeps shrinking. It's already down 12% in the last 3 years, and as our power grid moves toward renewables, it'll keep falling. Steel is strong, it lasts for decades, and it can be reused over and over without losing quality. It is a natural fit for adaptive reuse and for sustainable design. And if you want to put it to work, then download the free sustainability toolkit from our sponsor at aisc.org/buildgreen. That is aisc.org/buildgreen. One word there at the end. Go and check it out, and we'll get back to the show.
You know what's interesting is like you're actually talking to the overlap that naturally happens in growth, but you really kind of forget to acknowledge, or you don't realize that it's happening. So as I understand it, like what you just said was that slowly but surely, what ended up happening is that we were kind of generating the same types of leads and the same types of projects when we started our firm. And then we slowly became more selective, right? So if we were looking at the full 100% pie, before we were taking, this small 20%, kind of anything that we could get. And then as we got better, we became more selective and we started taking the other 20%, right? And naturally, as we start taking the other 20% of higher quality, then that pie, right? We take one piece of that pie and we almost fit it into another pie, right? Where then that's like the lower version of a whole nother piece of pie, right? And there's these small, like you're kind of slowly laddering up. But the idea of making like the jump from, nothing to something large is really hard to do, right? And it takes time. So instead, like people are and I say that because people are so often like looking for that one large jump. When in reality, you already have like a step in the right direction that you can take today. You already have leads or the opportunity to get leads that can move you closer to that today. It might not get you right there, but it's going to be a kind of a stepstone progressive process, compound impact, rather than some one large random move that happens.
This reminds me to connect these two dots. It's like most people overestimate what they can achieve in a year and underestimate what they can achieve in 10. So that same thing happens with a business. And if I use us as an example, I do not think we would be where we are today if we just went outbound and tried to pound on the doors of the biggest developers and the biggest architects saying like, we're H+O and like, we can do a great job. Like, what kind of work can you give us? Like, you're coming from a position of need and you're asking for opportunities. Whereas I learned this lesson and was able to articulate it to The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. It's a book I read in 2014 and really was a big influence on leading me down this lifelong learning journey. And the takeaway from his example, and he's a little bit extreme, is he wrote down in his notebook all of the things that he wanted in his perfect spouse and his perfect wife. And then he flipped over, and on the next page, he started writing down who is the husband that perfect wife would demand. And then he focused on becoming that person. And that's an extreme case, but like I think about that a lot as a business. So what we did at H+O is like, if we want to serve national architects, national commercial real estate developers, and we want to attract the best talent in the industry, who do we have to become as a company, as a culture, as an expectation and standard of excellence in the industry? Who do we have to become to attract them? What do we have to do to provide value to all of those entities so that they want to work with us? And so going back to word of mouth, it's like, what are the things you're doing organizationally? It's a chain reaction of all these little decisions throughout your business that impact word of mouth. And we haven't even started talking about marketing yet. Haven't even started talking about it, right?
There's an initial mindset that you're talking about. That obviously takes you to the next book, right? Which is Jocko's on ownership, right? Extreme ownership.
Yep.
Right. So, but the important thing that you're saying here is like, no one is coming to save us
100%
as business owners, right? You are in full control and responsibility of what happens in your business. Now, there's always going to be outside factors that are going to push upon and press upon and cause obstacles, I guess I would say, like in whatever your strategy or your plan is. But that doesn't mean that whatever happens in your business is completely out of your hands. And I think the second that you believe that it is out of your hands is the second your business is going to go down. Right? If you just let something else outside take the wheel, who knows what's going to happen at that point, right?
Hope's not a strategy.
Hope is not a very good one. It's not a very good one. It's not going to get any results. Well, we've kind of started doing this a little bit, but I'm really curious. All right. So we have Joe and Jane Smith sitting in between us, right? They run an architecture and engineering firm, and they're wondering, should I solely rely on word of mouth? How would we kind of coach them through this process of identifying how to address that question? What's the first thing that you think we'd do with them?
I would ask them, like, how do they deliver value to their customer? And I would ask them, who is their customer, right? Because if you don't know who you serve and how you create value to them, you can't even begin to start to influence word of mouth in the right direction to the right people. Because if you can't articulate it, all the people that want to refer you don't know how to refer you. You're not going to count, like, if I want to say, hey, I think you should talk to Tyler. Like, I have to know that you're a growth consultant to architects. So now I know if I have an architect that is in need of help on how to drive revenue and change their growth strategy, I can mentally connect it to Tyler and what he does because you have clear branding and a clear person that you serve. So for any architect out there, if you're doing anything and everything, people don't know when to come to you. They don't know when to refer you because you don't necessarily have a specific avatar that you serve.
That is, I almost want to just rerun exactly what you just said, because it's such an important thing to make. And it's also the downfall of most outreach and marketing strategies, right? So you kind of just slowly broke down, I think, what in my opinion is one of the most common myths in A&E firms, which is that it's better to be a generalist than to be a specialist, because a generalist can take on any type of work and a specialist can only take on a particular type of work.
Yeah, that's a blind spot. It's a blind spot. And there's and I'll share some lessons I've learned through my growth strategy. I got, as I ran my family steel business, which was structural steel and Miss Iron. And I was learning all of these. If I ran into a marketing, I ran into a sales, I ran into a strategic planning, you name whatever or like problem you ran into, I just started consuming audiobooks and podcasts every day to try to learn to solve those problems. Fast forward 4 years, we have all this growth despite our flaws. And I'm sitting there like, where do I start? Right? Like, I have all this business acumen. I feel like I'm on a seesaw. I'm a yo-yo in the middle of like this business thing. I fix one thing over here. This goes down. I'm like, if I were to start from zero, where do I start? And I got exposed to mergers and acquisitions, and I started seeing how they evaluated risk and value in a business. Risk is the inverse of value, right? So if you have risk to inconsistent lead flow, that means your business is more risky, which means your value is going down too. If you have good predictability and you can eliminate perceived risk of future growth, your value goes up. And one of the things that, again, I was still pounding my chest about, like, oh, we don't even need marketing. Like, you just do good work and be a good person and work comes to you. And having that clarity in who you are and who you serve and how you help them is one of the best investments that you can make to protect your business in a down market. Because in a down market, if people know who you are, who you serve, and how you create value, they know that they can find you. They're going to come and reach out to you. When the whole industry goes down in a down market, it becomes much harder to find customers. And if you can't articulate who you are and who you serve, then it becomes even more hard. It becomes harder.
Well, yeah, to your point, what happens in that down market is people are much more careful, right, about the money that they're spending. And typically what happens is that everyone ends up going to...
They'll cut marketing because money's tight.
Yeah, they cut marketing. But what ends up happening is clients, right, your ideal clients, they end up spending the money on the specialists rather than the generalists. That's what you're saying, right? Because they need to make sure that wherever they're spending their money is going to get them exactly what they want. And if they know where to go and they know who to serve, then they're already solving half of the issue. Which, by the way, like, back to, okay, first of all, understand, the value that you're delivering to your clients, right? Because even for that word of mouth, right? To your point, how are they referring you? What are they saying about you? And then now that you know how you're being described, right, and what your reputation is and how other people are communicating your value, how can you take that and add fuel to the fire so that you now know how to communicate your value, right? And what is actually attracting people and how they're talking about you? Because ultimately, if you can explain and communicate your value in the exact same way that your ideal market does, right? Not like an engineer, not like an architect, but like your client does, then you are golden.
No doubt.
You are golden. You want to speak it in your client's language, not in an architect or engineer's language.
So at H+O, through our journey, one of the things we do that separates us is we're the only structural engineering firm who is estimating and measuring the cost of the structures they design every single job. And we create an entire database and we compare it so that we show that transparently to our customer on how efficient their building is relative to other similar projects.
Relative to the industry standard, yeah.
Industry standards, our standard, just measuring, like, you can't manage what you don't measure. And we recognize our customer doesn't understand structural engineering. Big shocker there, right? Like, they don't know the difference between one engineering decision and another because they're not engineers. And so I look at money in our world, like in commercial real estate development, and honestly in any aspect, money becomes the universal language of design, development, and construction. So if we can create and train our team to communicate structural engineering decisions and impacts to a development in terms of money, that is much more relatable for the developer to connect to the point we're trying to make. I use this example of like a lobby. It'd be like, oh, interior design doesn't like columns. We want an open floor plan. Like, get rid of the columns. And an engineer might say, hey, it's expensive to create a transfer beam. Like, those columns like really want to go to straight to foundation. Nope, we don't like them. Versus, what's expensive? Expensive is relative. So I could say, hey, to create this open lobby that you desire, that's $150,000 or $200,000 in just structure. Is that a good allocation of capital for the development? Oh no, I would have never thought it was that much. I thought you meant like 30, 40 grand. Like, I can't spend 150 to get rid of the column. Like, the column's fine next to the couch. We can create a lounge area around that column, no problem. Right? So it's like, it's not that you didn't communicate the intent. It's that you were speaking a different language. So the understanding of the conversation was completely different. I use vertical and horizontal communication, and that's like the perfect example. Vertical communication is when two people are talking about a subject, but they have different understandings and level of expertise relative to the conversation. Horizontal, if I'm talking to another structural engineer, Jeremiah and I are talking, we have the same understanding of an engineering concept. We can have a verbal communication verbal conversation and walk away with the same understanding. But if one of us talks to an entry-level engineer, we have different understanding of engineering. Chances are, if we only have verbal communication, we're walking away with two different ideas. Same thing happens with your customer. Same thing happens with your customer. So you got to find that universal language of your value and try to connect those dots for your customer, because they're not going to connect it for you.
I think that's a good example, because there's a lot of architects and engineers, obviously, that work with developers, right? And developers are a perfect example of like, what is their core goal, right? Developers are, I mean, that is a profit-driven business. I mean, every business is profit-driven, but developers in particular, that is a profit-driven business, right? They care about numbers, they care about money. And so if you go to them talking about design, right, up front as being the top priority, they're probably not going to listen or understand you. But if you go to them and you frame the design around their end goal of profit, right, like you're talking about, and saying like, you know, okay, you can remove these columns and this is how much additional it's going to cost, right? Or you know, we have partners with specific manufacturers that allow you to get those high-end materials without having to spend the amount that you're looking for, so that you can still market these as luxury amenities without spending on luxury amenities. You know, how does that align with what you're looking to do? They're immediately, they're immediately engaged. So like, how do you speak their language so that you're also getting what you want? But more importantly, like, you're not going to get the project unless they trust that you can deliver what they want as well.
100%. Yeah. Connecting value.
So this turned into a conversation around communicating value effectively, right? Understanding and knowing your value. And then after you know how to communicate your value effectively, then it's just about pouring gasoline on the fire, right? Using that in many different ways. And I'll just say, like, you know, whether it's 3 months after you start your firm or whether it's 10 years after you start your firm, if you're listening to this and you are only relying passively, by the way, on word of mouth to grow your business is at risk. I speak to firm owners every single day that are coming to me because their word of mouth ran out, right? It used to work, and eventually it runs out, and it's different for every firm, but like, it does eventually run out. And if you don't have the skills or the systems or the value communication in place to be able to communicate your value effectively and to go out and generate your own leads actively rather than passively, you're going to be in trouble when that happens, right? Mm-hmm. And you might as well develop those skills, because those are the things that put you in a position like, you know, what Rens has built and compounded over this period of time, to not be in the scarcity mindset, and to know that no matter what, if one of his prospective clients doesn't choose him today, there's another one that's going to come in tomorrow, and he gets another shot at it, right? It's that beating that scarcity mindset.
I'll share, and I think my journey could be helpful to some business owners out there. And I already kind of explained our journey of growing through small and mid-sized back to large scale projects. And so I learned this importance of, what are you doing to drive word of mouth marketing? Do people know about you, right? How can you attract out? Like, I say this all the time. It's like, a lot of people will easily complain like, good people are hard to find. And it's like, or is it that your company's hard to find, or that good people have no clue why they should come work for your company because you haven't articulated it or put it out there to the world? So I did that through kind of founder-led marketing. That was our strategy. So I had never posted on social media before. I think this was like 2019. And because I had done all the lifelong learning and grew businesses and read and listened to audiobooks and podcasts, like, I had a lot of stuff to talk about and a lot of stuff to say. So like, that one habit led to having something to say online and building like confidence to do so. But again, our portfolio at that time didn't speak to the target avatar that we were going for to build a national company. So a lot of marketing can be like cross-promote projects with other key people. But our projects at the time didn't necessarily speak to where we were going. So I couldn't use that as my strategy to just promote my portfolio, because it didn't reflect who I wanted to be. And so instead, I started trying to become the company that would attract that talent. So I did start posting like thought leadership. I gave off a sense of like understanding the business and the pain points of architecture and engineering. I talked about organizational excellence and the things you run into in culture, in operations, in quality control and efficiency. And so what I was doing is I was just making sure H&O and myself as the founder and leader of the company were known in the market so that it could drive conversation. I could directly connect with all of the people that I wanted to be connected to in the market on LinkedIn. And what that was also doing was setting the stage so that when I did get a conversation, if anybody had seen my content at all, they weren't going to question if we knew how to run a business, because it was very clear that we pre-sold, we were eliminating that perceived risk. It's like that was clearly going to be an objection as we started doing bigger and bigger work. It was like, can you handle it? And like one of my answers is like, can you handle this project? I'm like, we're constantly growing our capacity, but we also are very intentional about saying no to work that doesn't fit our goals so that we can say yes to the project that does meet our goals in the direction of our company. And this project is directly in line with us becoming a national brand. And the companies that tell you they're too busy, like you're never going to hear that, because we have very good management of our pipeline and our revenue and our hiring. Those three things are all aligned. So if we tell you we can do something, we're going to be able to do it. And if you've been following our content, we already gave you this sense of organizational excellence and understanding. It's really like an orchestra to run a team in a business. And if you have blind spots, like I can generally tell what pain points I'm going to run into working with another company based on what I think their understanding of how all of these things connect, which is why like today's talking word of mouth, but I went way different path to talk about the things that might influence a positive word of mouth.
That is the first thing you should do in the market, right? Is understand what are the common pain points that they're tackling so that you already know like what the conversation is going to be. By the way, you shouldn't bring up those topics first. You should let them bring it up, but then you're already going to know how to respond because you've heard it 1,000 other times. I think a couple of questions to think about, for the listeners based on what Rens just said. And Rens, thank you for sharing that background, because I think it's so important for people to realize that you have so much built up knowledge and value that you can share with your audience today. I'll never actually forget the first time that I learned how to generate content and have a system behind it. I sat down, I think, for 2 hours and generated like 2 months worth of content because it was there. You just need to know how to do it. Yeah, you just need to do it. So, all right. So two questions I think to think about, right? If we could simplify this is, how are you filling your space and what are you making space for, right? In your business, how are you filling your space, right? What kind of clients are you filling your space with? And what are you making space for? Because Ren's example there was so important. It's like, we say no to clients that aren't a fit so that we can leave space for the clients that are the perfect fit that we're looking for. Rens, where can people go to learn more about you and to follow along?
Our website, check it out, is H+O.engineering. And you'll see kind of how we structure the type of people that we serve, but also our value proposition. So we have like a unique offer, which is the H&O cost index. That's our differentiating value delivery. But then our unique offer is that we'll review any other building design risk-free to the customer. They don't owe us $1 unless we help them capture $100,000 in savings or more. So that's like a unique way for us to, one, it highlights the value of our core service, but it also is like a lead magnet to draw in our ideal client and be able to show value and create a big win right out of the gate. I create a ton of content on LinkedIn, and then our podcast is Design Development. You can find that on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Thank you so much for joining us. Perfect example of a no-brainer offer, by the way, for the listeners. So go check out their website. Go listen to his podcast. It's amazing. He's been having conversations much longer than I have. And if you like Growth the Tech podcast, then you'll definitely like Design Development podcast too. Rens, thanks so much for joining us.
Tyler, thanks for having me. It was a great time.
All right, Growth Tech, that is a wrap on this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoy the podcast, then please take 30 seconds to share a review and tell me your favorite part so that I can keep making it better for you. And hey, if you want to work with me directly to increase your fees and start winning the biggest projects of your career, then send me an email at hello@growthatech.com with the word grow. That is it. Just email me the word grow at hello@growthatech.com and I will get you sorted out. All right, I'll see you next time, friends.